Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Introduction to Mattermark for Sales. My name is Courtney Buchanan and I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Mattermark. Mattermark is a data enrichment tool for modern sales teams. With our tool, companies access data from more than 4.1 million companies, and they can access 80 data points. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. By default, you're joining the webinar using your computer audio. If you'd prefer to join using your phone, just select so in the right-hand panel. You can also type any questions as we go in the right-hand panel under the questions section. We'll be answering these questions at the end of the webinar. Please share your insights on Twitter by using the hashtag #MakeYourMattermark, and you can follow the conversation that others are having as well. We'll be sharing the recording after the webinar, so feel free to sit back and absorb all the insights. Now we'd like to hear what you're most excited to learn about in the webinar, so please take this poll. Are you excited to learn what Mattermark is and how you can use it? How to improve sales operations, how to share data with your team, or how to find prospects that match your ideal customer profile? Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Ray Kim, Director of Sales at Mattermark. Ray will be giving an overview of Mattermark, and then we'll be diving into the platform for a demo. Now, without further ado, Ray, take it away.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today and to learn more about not only Mattermark, but our tool as well. I will be taking you through a general overview of what the tool is supposed to be, why it was built, and give you a general review of its use cases, but then we'll actually jump into the product itself and go through how a sales team should be using the tool today. First, I'd like to go over kind of the old model of lead gen versus today's automated models. The reason Mattermark exists is to remedy some of the inefficiencies that are involved with lead enrichment today. The old model, everything was very inaccurate, inefficient, a lot of manual workflows. Mattermark works to try to automate many of those workflows. A lot of the time that sales teams and salespeople use to find their next company or their next target is quite time consuming, so we've created a way to have actual emails and alerts around new prospects based upon the types of companies you are targeting. Other issues that are involved in today's data source is a lack of credible and updated data. We do not crowdsource any data. We actually update everything in our database at least every week, as well as keep everything updated and via API and other types of workflows. And finally, we provide contact info. Over 25 million email addresses are included in the data set, so you can find the right personnel to reach out to. First, I'd like to give you a sense of the scale and coverage that Mattermark provides. First, we have one of the largest databases at over 4.1 million companies globally. 1 million plus of those companies have reliable employee count data. We also track over 100,000 plus funding events around the world across VC, accelerators, angels, as well as private equity. We also track over 20,000 investor portfolios, and we also provide, again, over 20 million contact emails. The types of use cases that companies tend to utilize Mattermark for are A, private market investors. This includes VC, this includes growth equity and angel investing. But we also help many sales and marketing teams with lead generation. And then finally, corporate development teams like to use our data set to understand merger targets and partnership opportunities. This is a sample of just a few of the companies that are currently using Mattermark for sales and marketing purposes. In the Mattermark platform, there are 4 major things you can do. First is to search and filter for your target company, and being able to give Mattermark an idea of what your ideal customer profile is so that the system can identify as many other target companies as possible for you to reach out to. Another large use case in Mattermark is to be able to compare companies side by side. Being able to also track portfolios of investors so we can understand global investment activity from a geographic perspective or a industry perspective or both. And then finally, within Mattermark, you can create lists and share those lists with associates and keep track of your targets. This is an example of what you would see once you log into Mattermark for the first time. A very simplified way to query for the type of company that you are looking to target. However, we have many more key data points that we can use as ways to make more specific queries. A couple of these that I'd like to point out are your employee counts, which show obviously growth in a company based on their confidence and what stage they're at and whether they're ready to expand and grow. But we also track every funding event. We also score companies so that we understand from a very objective point of view which companies are growing relative to others. Now, with that said, I'd like to jump into the platform now. Here is our company database, a very familiar site to many who are on trial or who are our current clients. It's basically a very large spreadsheet, and that's honestly the best way to think about this product. It's a spreadsheet that has over 4.1 million companies in it. And as you can see, as I scroll to the right, every company is represented by the row, but we have many, many data points. A couple of scores here. Your current employee count, how the employee count has changed over time, any engagement online from unique web traffic on a monthly basis to mobile downloads. We also track social media, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, mentions, followers, etc. And the year founded as well as geography. We'll also track every round of capital along with every investor who has participated in that round. And then finally, we'll round things out with a revenue estimation, more specific geographic information, as well as industries and business models, which are all categorized and applied automatically via software. Based upon the content that we see on a company's website, in their description, certain documents such as their privacy policy and user license agreement, this type of content gives our software a very good idea of how to categorize these companies, as well as understand how these companies generate revenue. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I'd like to create a sample query, and I'll begin here in location, and we'll stick with the Bay Area. Our location filter goes down to the city, but we also have metropolitan regions, states, countries, etc. As soon as I click on Bay Area, we'll filter for the 49,000, 50,000 or so companies that result with this query. And I'm also going to narrow this down by clicking on enterprise software as an example. I'm also going to limit our search to private companies only. So immediately, we're left with a list of 1,083 companies, as you can see here. I want to point out that if you have under 5,000 results, and obviously we qualify here, we have the ability to do one or both of a couple of things. Number one, you can export once you get under 5,000 results, and everything gets dumped into a CSV for a further analysis within a spreadsheet. We also have the ability to save filters, which is a very, very important feature that I feel is a big value add for any sales and marketing team. If this is your sweet spot, and as you can see via these filters we've described, again, what we call the ideal customer profile, or basically your sweet spot, As a sales and marketing team, you would preferably like to be kept updated regarding any other companies that match this particular description. As Mattermark's algorithms continue to go out to the internet, continuously crawling for newly identified companies, every time we find another company that matches this particular description, we'll be able to email you an alert if you save the filter, as you can see here. You can also create an alert for any news stories for these particular companies. I also want to point out that these columns are also able to be filtered and sorted, so we can get extremely specific from, let's say, a total funding perspective, or even being able to identify or isolate companies that have or have not raised capital in a specific period of time. This button here on Add Edit Columns allows you to remove or include certain data points or data columns that are less or more relevant for you. Now, as we look at our list of companies here, we have defined our universe of 1,083 companies, which are, again, Bay Area enterprise software companies at these levels of funding. The next step from our perspective is to score these companies in an objective way so that we understand, out of these 1,083 companies, which companies should we be speaking to first, relative to which ones are basically looking for the ones that are growing very quickly. We have two ways upon how we score companies. The first is what we call the mindshare score. Because these are private companies, of course, we do not have any type of financial information, and we cannot use those metrics to gauge growth. So instead, what we do is observe certain directly observable metrics, such as web traffic, social media engagement, inbound links. These types of metrics give our system the ability to kind of distill into one number how much online traction that company has achieved. And this number here reflects the last 90 days. The 242 in the mindshare score gives us an idea of how much more mindshare this company has achieved over the last 90 days. It is a growth score. Again, I want to make that very clear, not an absolute score. And it gives us a sense of how much effort this company is putting out there in regards to getting the word of mouth going, creating buzz or hype, creating more traffic or attracting more traffic to their site, and having more articles written about them. Now, once we have the mindshare score, we then apply two other variables to get what we call the growth score, which is how everything is ranked. The mindshare score is a part of the growth score. However, everything on top of it is based on A, funding, but the larger weight to this growth score is actually not funding, but rather this number here, which is the number of employees added in the last 6 months, or basically how much hiring have you done in the trailing 2 quarters. For companies such as Udacity, they've grown 51% in the trailing 2 quarters, which is a very impressive headcount growth that we will pick up on and therefore assign the company a much higher growth score, therefore making it much more prominent on any query that it results in. Now, I also want to point out that once we have a list of companies here, we can continue to iterate this search. For instance, if we wanted to be very, very focused on those companies that are growing very quickly, we can actually add a minimum here on employee growth in the last 6 months to find only those companies that are quote unquote in a hyper stage of growth. This is pulling our number of results down to 311, but Mattermark is all about finding that focused list of companies that are best reached out to now. And if this is one of your variables, we have a very nice ready-made list of leads for your reps to attack immediately. I also want to point out that in order to change verticals, it's as simple as Xing out a previous filter and adding another one in its place, such as mobile. So now we're left with a bunch of companies that are, again, similar to our enterprise software query. However, we've just changed that to mobile. Still looking at companies that are growing 20% or more in the last 6 months. Now, what I'd like to do now is actually go into a company profile, kind of going towards the last step of the prospecting and lead gen process. After we've identified your companies and then looked at which ones are actually growing quickly, zeroing in on one company gives you the ability to do a deep dive. This is Udacity, and we have a lot of high-level information up top, such as geography and founded date and total funding. But we also have the ability to identify key personnel at the company in case you need to reach out to a particular role. For instance, if you wanted to reach out to just our marketing folks, we have the ability to filter those folks out specifically. Now, we also have the ability to click here on View Connections and understand whether we are connected to anyone via LinkedIn. This is simply a reverse URL search into LinkedIn, and it gives you the ability, as soon as it loads, that is, gives you the ability to understand whether you are connected to anyone at this company. And then finally, we provide email information. Over 20 million email addresses are included within Mattermark, and in order to reach out directly to that particular individual, we'll be able to provide you with that contact info. As I scroll down, you'll see that we have the ability to show you over time things such as employee count growths, the scoring over time, every round of financing in the company, along with every investor who has participated in that particular round. Mattermark began life as an investor tool, so we actually have a lot of portfolio information on all of these clickable investors. If I click on Google Ventures, for instance, we can do a very quick deep dive into their portfolio and understand historically where they have placed their capital. And we've done this for, again, over 21,000 investors. Continuing on the company profile, we have on the right similar companies, which is where many of our corporate development teams like to spend time. This is where we are going to compare vertical and business model information and be able to automatically generate a very data-driven list of who we think this company's competitors are. We also have the ability to very quickly compare this company along with the one that you found in the similar company area. And across the entire spectrum of metrics, we'll be able to do a side-by-side comparison. Now below, we have social engagement over time, as well as web traffic. And then finally, recent news on the right, along with the ability to look at downloads and rankings across iOS, as well as Google Play, for any mobile apps this company publishes. The idea here is to collect everything we can on these private companies and give our users the ability to slice and dice and massage the data as much as they'd like to identify, again, their next potential customer. Now, I'd like to go back to the company database and point out that we do have an advanced filters link here that I'd like to make sure everyone is aware of. This advanced filters link gives you the ability to use Boolean language and arguments to, again, create a very, very specific filter if you are looking for something very niche, let's say. Or if you are looking for a company that maybe is very specific and needs a lot more arguments for you to actually surface. Now, the next area I'd like to show you is up here in lists. If you go to lists and my lists, we have the ability to add companies to a particular watch list, regardless of what type of company it is. You also have the ability to click New List here and upload a list of URLs, as many as you'd like, honestly. And what we'll do is create a list so you can see all the metrics on those companies side by side. For those who travel and attend many conferences, in the list area we have a public list section that basically collects all of the exhibitors and sponsors to these events around the world and places them within a custom list so that you could look at everything side by side and have a handy reference while you're going to the show and walking through the actual conference itself. The last thing I'd like to show you is the My Feed section. This area was created specifically via feedback from our users who wanted a way to understand how the scores had changed over time since the last time they visited a tool, for example, and a very quick way to keep track of any news articles or announcements that involve your company, as well as, again, the ability to understand deltas from week to week across growth score, across funding, and then as well as employee count. Now that concludes our demo I'd like to just reiterate the fact that Mattermark gives you the ability to sift through millions of companies globally. And it gives you the ability to very quickly identify your next customer. Now, the next step after this demo is for any of you out there to visit Mattermark.com to sign up for a free 14-day trial. If you already have a trial, you can easily upgrade to the full version in your Mattermark account. And of course, you can always reach out to sales@mattermark.com if you're interested in learning more about our workflow options, such as our Chrome extension, our mobile app, our Salesforce integration, as well as our enterprise API.
Thank you, Ray. So in closing, Mattermark is the best way for you to have meaningful conversations with prospects and customers. Now we have about 8 minutes to take some questions from the audience. So there are a couple questions coming in, but as a reminder, you can submit additional questions through the panel on the side. So our first question is, what's Mattermark's international coverage?
Mattermark's total coverage is again 4.1 million. My sense is that about 1.1 million of those companies are US based, and the other 3 million companies are located outside the United States. Our areas of best coverage are, after the US that is, Western Europe. We also have excellent coverage in Israel as well as India.
Thank you. The next question is, what can be the maximum mindshare score?
Very good question. The mindshare score is actually a relative score, so there theoretically is no maximum. It is a relative score. So if a company has 2,000 mindshare, 1,000 mindshare, it is relative to the other 4.1 million companies in the database. That is the easiest way to kind of understand that.
The next question is, how often is the data updated?
Everything in Mattermark, well actually the vast majority of things in Mattermark are updated on a weekly basis. The employee counts are updated on a monthly basis because they tend to change a little bit slower. Funding rounds are crawled and targeted every single day. So that is a running algorithm that will always provide us with a daily update.
As a reminder, you can submit questions in the right-hand panel, and we'll be answering them now. Okay, the next question is, where will Mattermark be in a year in terms of features?
Really interesting question. My sense of this is as follows. Mattermark has proven that it can bring company data as well as investor data. We actually feel like the kind of final leg of this database is people data. So we will be focusing very heavily on things such as contact information, bringing more functionality around that, and having just generally more people data, such as movement of employees, etc. We'll also look to include a lot more workflow integrations. This year we added the Salesforce App Exchange integration, as well as introduced a new Republish API. Basically, we want our users to be able to have the benefit of Mattermark data, regardless of what their workflow is on a day-to-day basis.
Next question is, do you do a scoring based on geography or industry? Given the relative growth of different industries and geographies, that could be useful.
Another excellent question. Scoring based on geography or industry is not what we do. What the scores are meant for is simply for you to have the right companies on page 1, page 2, page 3. We don't want you to go to page 15 to find your next prospect out of a list of, let's say, 2,000 companies. We want to make sure that the scores are there not as an end-all be-all, but simply to cut through the noise and find you that signal. I will say that the scores are certainly a bit dependent on some of the social media indicators out there, but it does not mean that they're not useful for B2B companies. Obviously, B2C companies, consumer-facing companies will have a much larger social media presence, so to speak. And the mindshare scores will skew a little bit higher for those types of companies. But as long as a user, you continue to compare like companies, such as one B2B company versus another, and and not kind of mix a B2B versus B2C in terms of scoring, you'll be just fine, and the scores still do tend to be useful.
Another question is, do you integrate with other sales or marketing technologies?
Currently, we only integrate, well, our only turnkey integration is with Salesforce. We take feedback regarding what else we should integrate with, but for the time being, we do offer an enterprise API so that teams can build their own integration with whatever workflow they're utilizing. Next question, okay, go ahead, sorry.
Next question is, do you score non-corporate entities? For example, for sales teams that target nonprofits for their services.
Another interesting question. We score every single company that comes into Mattermark. And although we tend to focus on VC-backed technology companies, it doesn't mean those are the only companies that are existing within Mattermark. Our automated software will pick your company up as long as it has some sort of presence online. And what I mean by presence online is it's a URL, social media profile, articles written about you. If you have that kind of footprint online, we'll pick up your company. And of course, nonprofits and other entities do have that. Now, with that said, we still score them exactly the same as we do any other company. The mind share and the growth scores are exactly the same. But in those cases, we tend to not have the employee counts. If we don't have an employee count or some sort of funding information, it's more difficult or sometimes impossible to actually calculate the growth score from the mindshare score. In those cases, we will simply repeat the mindshare score since it's a large part of the growth score anyway.
The next question is, what use cases are marketers solving using your product?
Marketers, just like sales teams, have a need to identify kind of their next prospect. And what I've seen marketers actually do recently is take advantage of our Salesforce integration. The beautiful thing about pushing our data into Salesforce is the ability for users to create an alert around any data point that we push. So any data point that we provide can be sent to your Salesforce instance, and from there you can actually create an alert around Twitter followers, for instance. I know that we have at least a couple teams that are creating an alert around a certain number of Twitter followers or LinkedIn followers, whatever your trigger or your indicator might be. Let's say there's a marketing team that wants to make sure that they reach out to any company with over 10,000 Twitter followers. You have the ability to push the number of Twitter followers into your Salesforce instance and create an alert around 10,000. Once that hits, you can automatically assign that company or record to someone in your organization. We'll wait another minute for any more questions. I think we have one more question which I'd like to address. Is there a functionality to see the reporting structure? I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I will do my best to kind of interpret that. I'm wondering if that means the org chart or who reports to who. We do not provide that information. We only provide names and titles and roles at that company. So yes, it was the org chart. We don't provide that. We only provide names and titles and email contact information.
All right, that's about all we have time for today. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at sales@mattermark.com. We'll be sharing the recording in the next day or two, and stay tuned for our next webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.